Hi, I'm Dr. Oliver of the Department of Philosophy and Religious Studies, as well as the Honors College and the MALA program, Master of Liberal Arts at Middle Tennessee State University. And I'm pleased to offer a few words of support for the Civic Virtue program this fall, as well as to tell you about an upcoming course that I'm looking forward to in the spring. It's called Democracy in America, MALA 6050. This 3-credit Master of Liberal Arts course, a remote course, remote but not distant in an emotional sense, will begin with a nod to the eponymous 19th century classic, Democracy in America by Alexis de Tocqueville. Then we'll glance at John Dewey's Democracy and Education from 1916, and then proceed to examine the condition and prospects for American democracy as assessed by contemporary observers like Nancy MacLean, Anne Applebaum, and Robert Talisse. We'll conclude by venturing our own evaluations, understanding the always tentative nature of political prognostication that must be even more uncertain in unsettled times like our pandemic present, but we'll risk it. Much, of course, depends on the outcome and integrity of the November presidential election and its aftermath. Our course will address that as well. Genuine democracy in the world has been a rare and precious achievement historically. Is our democracy now really in chains? MacLean. In twilight? Applebaum. Are we overdoing it to the point of possible extinction? Talisse. A nation that values its freedom must face these kinds of difficult questions, and that's our mission in the course. Alexis de Tocqueville, we read at the Goodreads site, a young French aristocrat came to the young nation to investigate the functioning of American democracy and social, political, and economic life of its citizens, publishing his observations in 1835 and 40. Many of them still hold true on the mixed advantages of a free press, the strained relations among the races, and threats posed to democracies by consumerism and corruption. And we could add environmental degradation. He wrote, "Without common ideas, there is no common action, and without common action, men and women still exist, but a social body does not. Thus, in order that there be a society, and all the more that this society prosper, it is necessary that all the minds of the citizens always be brought together and held together by some principal ideas." Are we holding together the way de Tocqueville said we must? Or is the social glue, the social fabric, coming too loose? We'll ask ourselves. De Tocqueville said patriotism is in itself a kind of religion. It does not reason, but it acts from impulse of faith and sentiment. We'll talk about that. And nothing is more necessary to the culture of the higher sciences or of the more elevated departments of science than meditation, by which I think he means reflection, critical reflection. And nothing is less suited to that than the structure of democratic society. We set ourselves a real challenge when pursuing democracy, but it's an important one. He said it was never assumed in the U.S. that the citizen of a free country has a right to do whatever he or she pleases. On the contrary, social obligations were and are there imposed upon the citizen, more various than anywhere else. And nothing is more wonderful than the art of being free, but nothing is harder to learn how to use than freedom. And he says much, much more that seems to speak across the ages directly to us in our time. Well, then John Dewey. What does democratic education mean in the 21st century? Dewey said democracy has to be born anew every generation, and education is its midway. And he said this, which is almost eerie to hear and read at this moment. If a plague carried off the members of a society all at once, it is obvious that the group would be permanently done for. Yet the death of each of its constituent members is as certain as if an epidemic took them all at once. But the great difference in age, the fact that some are born as some die, makes possible through transmission of ideas and practices the constant reweaving of the social fabric. Yet this renewal is not automatic unless pains are taken to see that genuine and thorough transmission takes place. The most civilized group will relapse into barbarism and then into savagery. That from Democracy and Education, 1916. And then in our time, Nancy MacLean. The description at Goodreads of MacLean's Democracy in Chains begins this way. Behind today's headlines of billionaires taking over our government is a secretive political establishment with long, deep, and troubling roots. The capitalist radical right has been working not simply to change who rules, but to fundamentally alter the rules of democratic governance. But billionaires did not launch this movement. A white intellectual in the embattled Jim Crow South did. Democracy in Chains names its true architect the Nobel Prize-winning political economist James McGill Buchanan, and dissects the operation he and his colleagues designed over 6 decades to alter every branch of government to disempower the majority. This will be a controversial read for some of us, but I think an essential one. You know, if you've been on MTSU's campus in recent years, that there is a prominent historical placard commemorating Buchanan's connection to MTSU. It says he's the grandson of a former governor. He attended Middle Tennessee State Teachers College, the University of Tennessee, and the University of Chicago, etc. Is he a hero, a scoundrel, somewhere in between? We'll talk about it. But MacLean writes, public interest has been subordinated to private interest, and when there is no clear distinction between them, it opens the door to endless opportunities for corruption. Anne Applebaum. Across the world today, from the Americas to Europe and beyond, liberal democracy is under siege, while populism and nationalism are on the rise. In the twilight of democracy, prize-winning historian Anne Applebaum offers an unexpected explanation that there is a deep and inherent appeal to authoritarianism, to strongmen, and especially to one-party rule, that is to political systems that benefit true believers or loyal soldiers or simply the friends and distant cousins of the leader to the exclusion of everyone else. People, she argues, are not just ideological, they are also practical, pragmatic, and opportunistic. They worry about their families, their houses, their careers. Some political systems offer them possibilities, others don't. The modern authoritarian parties that have arisen within democracies today offer the possibility of success to people who do not thrive in the meritocratic, democratic, or free market competition that determines access to wealth and power. She writes, throughout history, pandemics have led to an expansion of the power of the state. At times when people fear death, they go along with measures that they believe, rightly or wrongly, will save them, even if that means a loss of freedom. Now, very timely to consider Anne Applebaum's book, Twilight of Democracy, The Seductive Lure of Authoritarianism. And then Robert Talisse, my old friend from Vanderbilt, former chair of their department, their philosophy department. We live in an age of polarization, as political beliefs on the left and the right have been pulled closer to the extreme, so have our social environments. We seldom interact with those with whom we do not see eye to eye. Making matters worse, we're being appealed to by companies, products, and teams, for example, based on our deep-seated polarized beliefs. Our choice of Starbucks or Dunkin' Donuts, Costco or Sam's Club, soccer or football, New York Times or Wall Street Journal is an expression of our beliefs and a reinforcement of our choice to stay within the confines of our self-selected political community, making us even more polarized, letting it bleed into these choices in every corner of our lives. We take democracy too far and it ends up keeping us apart. We overdo democracy. And that's his book, Overdoing Democracy, Why We Must Put Politics in Its Place. So, we've got a lot on our plate for that course and a lot to think about in terms of civic virtue. What it means to be a good citizen of a vibrant and healthy democracy. And there's never been a better time to think about that than in a time of health crisis as well as a time of political turmoil and on the eve of an election. So I hope to see some of you, to Zoom with some of you in the spring, Tuesdays 6 to 9. In the meantime, this Civic Virtue program is something I'm happy to stand with and for, and here's to democracy. Talk to you later.